Hi guys, so today I want to talk about straight arm inverts. I'm going to share 5 common mistakes that I see and what you can do to fix them so that you can work towards your straight arm inverts with success. My name is Verity and I am an online coach. I specialise in strength and conditioning for aerialists. So let's get into it. Straight arm inverts are a really amazing skill in aerial. They show a lot of strength and a lot of control. But I see so many aerialists not having a clear path on how to work towards them or struggling with them when they just don't need to be. So I'm going to take you through some of the common mistakes that I see, what you can do to fix them, so that you have a clearer idea of how to assess what's going on in your own body and make some changes to the way you are training your inverts. So mistake number 1 is throwing your head back, and I will show you what that looks like. So it makes sense why we would try and do this. A lot of times we think that our body will follow where our head goes, and that is true in a lot of movements. But what happens if we try and throw our head back is that it actually opens our chest and causes our spine to arch. So if we are trying to compress at the hip, lift our hips, and lift our legs, we need to be in a hollow position. Throwing our head back literally creates the opposite of that. To fix this, you can either keep your head in a neutral position, or if that doesn't feel intuitive to do, you can tuck your chin. So a nice cue for this is to try and look for your belly button. What this does is it allows you to get into a more hollow position, making it easier to compress at the hips and lift them up. So I'm going to exaggerate this. I'm going to look right down to my belly button. And you can see the difference in terms of the position of my torso and the movement that that allows by looking down towards the floor. So this is something that you can also test out lying on the floor. If you tuck your chin and look down and lift your legs up, you'll feel how that tucked chin and looking towards your belly button helps you to create that hollow body position that we want when we are moving through our invert. So the second mistake that I see aerialists making is not training the top of the invert. Whether you are working on bent or straight arm inverts, these movements are made up of a start, a middle, and an end. And oftentimes we think that it's just one thing, and we don't take the time to break it down and look at each individual section. If you are not strong in the top of your invert, if you don't train that position and you don't know the position that you're trying to hit to finish the movement, it can make it really difficult to successfully complete the movement. So if you are trying to invert and you're getting stuck around here in this position, or you're just training the invert to this position with your hips dropped and your back rounded, that is actually missing out the end of the movement, and that's missing out an opportunity to build strength in a position that not only helps your inverts but helps with more advanced skills like meat hooks. So what can we do to fix this? There is an exercise that I call top position pulses. I definitely didn't make this up. I think lots of coaches use it, so you might know it with a different name. But it basically trains the strength and control in the very top position of our invert. And I'll show you how it works. So I come to the top of my invert, and the very first thing I do is work on this position. So squeezing the shoulder blades, pushing the chest forwards. My back is pretty much straight. My pelvis is tilted away from me. My legs are tense. I'm pointing my toes. From here, I'm going to round my back and drop the hips slightly, and then pull back up. Round my back and drop the hips slightly, pull back up. So this very simple, small movement can make a huge difference to your invert. Working on building that strength in that really high straddle where your hips are up by your wrists and everything is super active and engaged will set you up for success with achieving your full invert. So mistake number 3 is bending the elbows. If we are trying to build strength for a true straight arm invert, we need to be training straight arm strength. Something that I see happen a lot is if an aerialist already has their bent arm invert, or they just feel stronger with bent arms, that can take over without even realizing. And I'm not talking about micro bends. This isn't about aesthetics. This is bending the elbows using different muscles than the muscles that we want to be using for our straight arm invert. It changes the invert and it can be very subtle, and I'll give you a little demo of this. So my arms are straight, and as I lift, I bend to pull up, and then I straighten again. And on the way down, straight, and then a small bend. So you can see it's not a huge movement, but that engagement of the biceps changes our invert. So we really want to be focusing on completely straight arms. Oftentimes, if we're bending the arms, it's just because we don't yet have the straight arm strength for the invert. And so this is something that we need to work on. There is no quick fix for building straight arm strength. This is something that takes time and it takes consistent practice. But there is a drill that I really love that I use with my clients called half negatives. And this allows you to work on going up and down through part of your invert, keeping your arms completely straight. This exercise will meet you where you are currently at in terms of your strength, and you can use it to progress your straight arm strength in a safe and easy way. For our half negatives, we are going to invert. We're going to lower our hips as much as we can before we hit that point where we feel like if we kept going, we couldn't pull ourselves back up. And we're going to pull back up. So it's similar to when you're training skin the cat, right? You want to go as far as you're able to before you get stuck and can't pull yourself back around. We are using that same principle with this exercise. So I am going to invert, hit my nice top position, my nice straddle. Then I'm going to drop my hips, round my upper back, lower down, and then pull back up with straight arms. So maybe for you, it's just this movement, and that's fine. Maybe you've got more straight arm strength and you can go a bit lower. Either way, we are working on moving through part of our invert and pulling back up, keeping our arms straight throughout. Mistake number 4 is not compressing enough at the hips. So one of the things that we're trying to do with our invert is get our weight evenly distributed underneath our hands as quickly as possible. And in order to do that, we need to try and get our feet and the lower part of our leg on this side of our arm. The easiest way to do that and the quickest way to do that is compressing at the front of our hip as we invert. And so a lot of times people just either forget that they need to do this, or maybe they haven't yet built the strength for it. But if we don't compress at the hip and we keep our hips open, we're essentially trying to invert through an advanced calisthenics position, so a pike straddle front lever. And I will show you what this means. I'm going to do an invert trying to compress as little as possible, and you'll see how much I have to rely on my upper body and how difficult this version is. So I'm going to try and keep my hips open as I lift up and come to the top of my invert. So to fix this, we want to compress at the hips as quickly as possible as soon as we start to invert. So I'm going to show you what that looks like, and you should be able to see a difference between this version and the one that I just showed you. and I'm basically trying to get my feet and the lower part of my legs over this side of my arms as quickly as possible. So I'm going to invert, compress, and then lift up to finish. So you can see how shifting the weight over to the other side of my arms helps to lift my hips more easily. And so this is something that you can focus on with your invert training. There are also so many different ways to train compression strength, and I train it on the floor in isolation as well as from a hang as part of whole body movements. But I'm going to give you a quick drill that you can try that I find super useful for compression strength for inverts. So we're going to hang, legs in front. We're going to tuck the knees and try and lift the pelvis, straighten the legs, and lower down. I'm trying to avoid too much of this. I don't really want to be using my lats and shoulders to compensate. I think about pushing my head forwards, and this helps me to avoid this. So I'm trying to keep my head on this side of my arms. So I tuck, straighten, and lower down. So the fifth and final mistake that I see people making with their invert training is training the negative incorrectly. And this follows on from what I was talking about with compression strength and compressing at the hip to change how your weight is distributed underneath your arms. If you do your negatives and you find that your hips just drop to the floor, that is likely because you aren't compressing at the hips on the way down. We need to keep the weight evenly distributed underneath our hands for as long as possible with our negative to be able to slow it right down. So if we don't compress in our hips to help keep our feet and lower leg on this side, we're going to keep the angle of the front of our hip open, and we're basically just going to lower through the advanced calisthenics position that I was talking through, so the pike straddle front lever. So I see this so much where, because the technique of the negative is just not right, aerialists are training a movement that's just not giving them anything. It's not helping them at all, because if you can't do a negative slowly, you're not getting the benefits from it. So I'm going to show you what I mean where we do our negative without compressing. You can see how, as soon as I started to drop my hips, because I didn't compress at the front of my hip, my legs were on this side of my body and my hips dropped super fast. So to fix this, we want to think about compressing on the way down, and I'm going to take you through a little bit of technique for the negative so that you can get more out of doing this. So I'm in my invert. The very first thing I'm going to do is round my upper back and try and compress at the hips. So before my hips even come away from my hands, I'm coming into this position, and then I'm pulling my down towards the floor as much as I can. Then I start to slowly lower, and you can see how much more control I have because more of my weight stayed behind me for more of the negative. So the next time you're working on your negative invert, make sure that you are actively compressing at the hips. Make sure that you are trying to keep your feet behind you for as long as possible and see how that makes a difference. So I hope that this has been helpful. I do want to stress that inverts are hard and they take time to achieve. The thing that really helps with a skill like this is having clear, structured programming that meets you where you're currently at, that assesses you, looks at your limitations, and then gives you the steps to safely and progressively build the strength and control and technique that you need. What I've shared today is also kind of just scratching the surface. There are other elements that need to be addressed when we're working on inverts and other aspects of training that can impact how you experience working on a skill like this. Mobility and flexibility play a huge part in inverts, and so do things like individual types and proportions. So, for example, depending on whether you have a long or short torso or long or short legs, that can impact how you experience some of these exercises, and they can make certain aspects of inverts harder or easier. But I hope that what I've shared gives you some ideas of how you can address and improve your invert if that's something that you're working on. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more.